Hello and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today for Color Throughout the Year and Garden Q&A with Lili Singer. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to welcome any of you who are new to the California Native Plant Society and tell you a bit about our organization and our favorite topic, native plants. California's native plants are what make California look like California, from the Joshua tree of the Mojave Desert to the redwood forest of the North Coast. We are lucky to live in one of the most botanically rich places on Earth, with more types of native plants than any other state in the US. At the California Native Plant Society, we think that's something worth celebrating and protecting, and we invite you to join us. CNPS is a nonprofit organization made of more than 10,000 members, 35 local chapters, and a team of staff. Together, we're working to conserve wildlands, protect endangered species, collect scientific data, and restore nature to our home and public landscapes, one garden at a time. We are the voice for plants. Plants need us more than ever now that we face the combined challenges of climate change, an extinction crisis, and growing development pressure. But we need them too. In fact, none of us, not the insects, the birds, nor humans, can exist without them. So when we save plants, we save everything else. If you're inspired by what you see and hear today, please consider getting involved. Become a member by visiting cnps.org/join, or sign up to receive our emails and learn more about what we're doing at cnps.org/get-connected. Now I'd like to introduce the people who are helping put on our show today. Our tech host is Ed, and if Ed pops in, you'll know that we may be having an issue. And our question and answer host is Arlie Montalvo. And please direct your questions, your garden questions, into the Q&A if possible, and not into the chat. And then it is my great pleasure to introduce somebody who's been working on behalf of plants, and especially native plants, for many, many years. She is an award-winning horticulturist. And my interest in native plants was helped along by her early series of articles in the Los Angeles Times about native plants when no one else was talking about them. When everyone thought that native was just only cactus, Lili Singer was writing and speaking and talking about native plants. And then she went on to develop the Theodore Payne education series that we all depend on today. And so welcome, Lili Singer. You are on mute.
Thank you, Orchid. It's really good to be here, and it's so good to see you. And thank you, Arlie and Ed, for your help. I'm really excited to make this presentation to you on the first day of spring. And we hope you have a lot of great questions and answers to throw at me and Orchid after the talk. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And I want to let you know that I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. We don't have a lot of time, and we want to leave time for, where is my screen? Let's see. We want to leave a lot of time for, Ed, what's happening here? Let me open this up again, make sure it's open. And
it looks like it's the other tab on your desktop.
Yeah.
So you just need to switch to that
Okay.
other tab.
Somehow I closed it because I had it open. Yeah. So here we go. I will be providing a plant list to the folks in the society and the chapter in the next couple of days. So that will be emailed to all participants or sent somehow. I will be going pretty quickly, as I said, through these things. It's meant to be an experience and not a definitive talk on garden color. As Orchid mentioned, we have a huge and diverse flora in California. So this is just a taste, just a tiny taste of some of the things that you might see during the year. And the premise of this is to say you can have color all year in a native garden. And that's what we want you to do in your own garden. So here we are coming up kind of slowly. Not sure why, but it is coming.
Yeah.
And let's see. Just waiting until we can put this up on the screen.
Lily, just quickly,
Yeah.
you have 2 tabs open for.
That's what
the
I see,
PowerPoint.
yeah.
That's gonna mess up your bandwidth.
Okay, just closed one of them. Sorry for the delay, everybody. Okay. Oh dear, okay. Yes, and now the kitty's coming in. She's a native. Shoot, you guys want to vamp while I do this?
Sure. So it's raining where I am today in Sierra Madre, California, which is next to Pasadena, where the Rose Parade ends. And we love particularly the late rains toward the end of March, just because they often give us much better wildflowers. So now is a good time to look into going out to one of the wildflower reserves in the next couple weeks after the rain stops, and seeing if you can go and see some of our beautiful native annuals. The Antelope Valley may be lovely, and the Coachella Valley may also be lovely this year because our rain came so late.
I just want to, I just want to say they can check the Theodore Payne Wildflower Hotline for hotspots.
Okay, we're doing one more try here. And here we go, we're loading up, just a little slow. So yes, I had rain in Tujunga, California, in a little spot between the San Gabriels and Verdugos at about 2,200 feet. Had lots of hail last week. That was really, really exciting. Okay, come on, little program. There aren't that many slides. It's just loading up slowly. So yes, we don't expect a really great wildflower year, but these rains certainly will push a little bit that we haven't had before. Of course, in places north of here, the show will go on into the summer, and they got more precipitation. So I think we'll be able to see more there. So, okay, we're almost there. So, Arlie, we have to get every slide loaded before this, before I can share it, huh?
I think
Yeah.
that's correct.
Okay.
When they're all loaded,
Yeah.
you'll be able
Not,
to go to
yeah,
slide.
slideshow is what I meant.
Yeah.
So it will happen very shortly. It's almost done. And thank all of the viewers for their, for their patience. Here comes slideshow from the beginning. Here we go. Okay. Ed, you want to turn my face off?
Now you have to do it.
I couldn't find the button to do that this morning. Very strange.
Wiggle your mouse and you'll see at the
I took
bottom.
care of it already. She's got her
Okay,
video
great.
off.
Nice.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Okay, so this is about year-round color with California natives. Just as a beginning, if you are a beginner or if you don't have this book, this is the one book to get. It is a great compilation of more than 500 different native plants with wonderful information about them, and there's some great lists in the back. And it is more or less the Bible of the native plant world, and a must-have for every native plant gardener. And you'll get a lot more ideas from reading this book. So this is our marvelous state. We do live in an amazing place. We right now have approximately 7,000 native species, subspecies, and varieties that have been described by science. And of course, there are many, many more out there that we haven't found and described. And this is more plants in our state than in all of the other contiguous states combined. So that's the lower 48. Pretty amazing. And the reason we have such a diverse flora is because of the size and nature of our state. We have the highest point in the lower 48 and the lowest point in the lower 48. And they're only 100 miles away from each other. And then we have mountains, we have oceans, we have deserts, et cetera, et cetera. So this has given way to an amazing, wonderful plant palette. Okay, come on. Whoops. Go back up. Got a little delay on this. So a very important point is that no matter where you are on Earth, native plants evolved along with native animals. And so by putting year-round color in your garden, you're going to attract and support all of these wonderful wild creatures that we want to come to our garden, including things that pollinate our plants and eat or prey or parasitize the bugs that we don't want on our plants, and they basically keep it all in balance. And if you don't have wild creatures in your garden, then something is wrong. First of all, don't use pesticides, but we won't spend too much time on that. So just a note, color is not just flowers. It's lots of flowers, but it also includes fruit, seed and seed heads, foliage, and we do get some fall winter color here. It's not like Vermont, but it can be nice. And of course, bark. There are many, many colors of bark, and all of these things go to make up the vision that we see. And we don't want to give short shrift to any of these things and just concentrate on the flowers. But of course, those are the things that are so dear to us. So next slide is coming. Okay, I start this program actually in the starting with the fall because, darn it, to watch this, because fall is the time when we start getting our seasonal rains. Natives that have been dormant, taking a little rest over the summer, are starting to wake up and they're ready to root and grow. So this would include things that are in your garden that have been dormant, and also plants that you might pick up at a nursery, or seeds or bulbs that you might put in now. They're all ready to go with the rains, and that's their natural cycle. So I'm going to show you a few things that do flower in the fall. The first one is one of those things that is a total backbone for all native plant gardens, and I wish this slide were coming up. There are certain things that you want to guarantee that you have in your garden, and I will mention a couple of those as we go along. So number one is our California fuchsia, used to be called Zauschneria, and in many references you will still see it under that name. The new classification is Epilobium canem bicanum, and there are many, many species, several species, and many, many cultivars that have been developed. This one is a species. These flower, they can start flowering in late summer, they flower through the fall, and then they stop. And these are hummingbird magnets. The other common name for this is hummingbird trumpet. And this is a generally they are low growing perennials, spreading, and the only care they really need is in January, you cut them back to stubs and let them start over again, so you have a nice compact plant. Super drought tolerant, wonderful plant, loves the sun. Now we'll wait for the next slide. This has been planted really nicely, this Zauschneria, because it's draping over the wall. You don't have to have it work that way, but it's a very fine way to display it. These also will work in pots if you are limited. And as I said, there are many, many wonderful cultivars out there. This is a garden staple for summer and fall. It's California Goldenrod. This is actually a riparian plant. It does want some regular water. or moderate water, lots of sun. And it is a pollinator magnet. It's one of those yellow composites, one of those daisy family members, and it just attracts so many insects. You wouldn't believe it. So this is a great plant to have in your garden. Fall fruit. The things that have flowered in late spring and summer will be producing their fruit. And this is a good example of a fall fruit, which are rose hips. Wonderful for making teas, high in vitamin C, and the beasties love them. And this is of our California wild rose. So in mid-spring and early summer, you see lots of wonderful pale pink inch-wide single roses on this plant. It's a great plant. It also is a riparian plant, and it likes some shade. So it needs moderate water to make it happy, especially in Riverside, San Bernardino, and a little bit of afternoon shade, and lots of place to ramble. We also have fall seed heads, and this is one of my favorite California native plants. It is St. Catherine's lace. It is the largest of all of our buckwheats. It's native to the Channel Islands. On the left is the plant in spring, covered with these huge inflorescences. And in fall, late summer and fall, you see them turning brown, or rusting, as we call it, with buckwheats. All of the buckwheats, their flowers turn brown or rust colored or black when they finish. And this plant is great. It's a big shrub. It can get 5 by 5 easily. And all stages of these flowers are cuttable. We also, as I mentioned, do have some fall winter foliage. So here are two, Acer Macrophylum, big leaf maple, which does need regular water, or moderate water. I keep correcting myself. I don't want you to water it too often. I mean, needs it every 7 to 10 days once established. And it can turn some beautiful colors. And then this is a guaranteed one for everyone. This is our basket bush. The leaves actually look like poison oak, to which it is closely related. It gets about 6 by 6, wonderful shrub, and it has guaranteed great reddish, orange, yellowish fall color. We're moving into winter. So this is the time that both plants and gardeners thrive on seasonal rains. They're so welcome, and peak planting continues. This is always the first Manzanita to bloom. It's native to Santa Barbara County. It is a beautiful and relatively fast-growing Manzanita. So this is Refugio Manzanita. Over on the right, you can see the foliage, and don't forget, foliage is color. And in this case, you can see the glaucous blue on this one. A lot of native plants have beautiful blue foliage. What we lack are the chartreuses and the burgundies that you see in things from other parts of the world. But we have the most elegant and wonderful palette of blues and grays and greens and silvers, and they all look really good in our hot sunlight. At the bottom is the bark off of Refugio Manzanita. All Manzanitas shed their bark in the spring. It's kind of like a lizard shedding its skin, or a snake, and here's a beautiful picture of that. This is one of the earliest of all of the Cyanothis to flower, hoary leaf, or Cyanothis crassifolius, and it has a pretty wide range. It occurs in many mountain ranges, including the Verdugo, San Gabriel, Santa Monica, and San Bernardino mountains. On the left, you can see great slope of it in the Santa Monicas, and over on the right is a close-up of the flowers. And these are flowering for sure now. This is a great garden plant. There are several species of berberis, also known as Mahonia in old literature. And this is one of the stars. It's called Golden Abundance. These are upright canes topped with these wonderful yellow flowers in the winter. And then they are followed in the spring by those blueberries at bottom right, which are very, very delectable to birds. Winter silhouettes. When some of our trees lose their leaves, they are absolutely gorgeous. So on the left is one of my favorite plants. It's Platinus Rasamosa, and it is our western sycamore. These trees can get to be 40 feet wide and 80 feet tall, so you want to have a good space in your garden for them. But not only do they have the most exquisite mottled bark, but they are just absolutely breathtaking when they're out of when they're in the wintertime when they have no leaves. On the right is Escalas Californica, which is actually dormant for much more than winter. This is a plant that spends most of its year looking just like this, with incredibly beautiful silvery white bark. You just need to put it in the right place where you can appreciate it. And in spring, it throws up upright candles of whitish flowers. Really, really gorgeous plant. Winter fruit. So we don't have a lot of fruit in winter, and this is the one we definitely want. And this is one of those plants that everybody should have in their garden. It is one of the most common plants in the state. Its range is vast, all up the West Coast and down into Baja California. It is a large shrub, small tree that flowers with white flowers in late spring, early summer, summer, I should say, and then they are followed by winter berries. And what's important is there aren't a lot of berries in the winter. So this is an absolute staple for the birds in our area. And that's why it's important to put it in your garden so that you have guaranteed food for the birds. Over on the right is an American robin. They're real smart, the birds. They tend to wait until the fruit are pretty ripe. At which point they're a bit fermented and the birds can get a little wacky because they get kind of drunk on the berries sometimes. So it's a nature show out in your garden when you have one of these. Really easy plant. Again, this can grow in a pot too if you're limited on space. Toyon is whoops, notice that shouldn't be italicized. A wonderful, wonderful plant. Succulents. My background is in succulents, actually. My parents owned a nursery that specialized in rare succulents, and here are just a few. So here's a flowering Hespero yucca whipplei, which actually is going to then, mom is going to die, and she's going to leave behind a bunch of pups, little babies. Over on the right is Mammalaria Dioica, which that plant is probably about 50 years old, and it's probably about 6 to 8 inches tall. And that is pretty common in our local deserts. And in the bottom is a native of Baja California called Britain's Dudleya brittani. And this one is actually considered by most people to be the most beautiful of all of our Dudleyas. And it is a real gorgeous thing. Spring, so many flowers, so many pollinators. This is one of my favorite pictures taken by Wynn Wilson and Brian Leach of an Anna's hummingbird on scarlet bugler, which is a species of penstemon. And you're going to see another one later. Guaranteed hummingbird attractor. And this is also for the hummingbirds. All the ribes are pollinated by hummingbirds. Currants do not have thorns. Gooseberries do. And as you can see on the picture on the right of the ribes speciosum, it's got some pretty ferocious thorns. All ribes in California lose their leaves in the summertime, except for one, which is called evergreen currant. But these are great flowering shrubs. On the left is a chaparral currant, gets about 5 or 6 feet tall, about 4 or 5 feet wide, with hanging clusters of very beautiful pink flowers. And then over on the right is ribes speciosum. This one wants a little bit of shade in your area, and it grows with arching branches with these wonderful pendant flowers. Of course, spring is wildflowers. You want to plant your seed for your wildflowers in fall or early winter. We have hundreds of different wildflowers, annuals, and you can put together quite a beautiful display. We also have over 300 species of bulbs in California, geophytes. I put this one in because it is local to your area. It's Calicortus kennedyi, and this is the desert Mariposa lily, and it is that incredibly saturated orange color, sometimes a little reddish. It's just a beauty. So don't forget, put it on your calendar for October and November to plant your bulbs. Also happening is Arctostaphylos Howard McMinn. There are early and late Manzanitas and Cyanothis. So I showed you the crassifolius, the Refugioensis before, and this is Howard McMinn, which is an extremely popular and very available Manzanita, and it flowers later in the springtime. Cyanothis Yankee Point has been in the trade for decades. It's one of the first natives that ever was in regular nurseries. The flowers are a beautiful sky blue, very, very prolific. And this is a fast growing and spreading ground cover. One gallon plant will cover 100 square feet. So be very careful when you purchase and plant these. Over on the right, you can see a garden with them, and that's just one plant in the front there. They really will get that big and they grow really fast. It's a wonderful, wonderful garden plant. This is my favorite of all the irises in California. It's called Iris Canyon Snow. Not sure if it's a hybrid or a sport, but it puts out these beautiful flowers. They're about 2.5, 3 inches in diameter, and very, very floriferous. The foliage also looks really good when the plant is out of flower, which is really a lovely thing. The other iris I didn't put in is Douglas iris, which is different shades of purple. And that is a great species. So that's Douglas iris you can put on your notes there. Diplicus trish. We have monkey flowers like crazy in California. And this is a cultivar. It's not a species. And it's a wonderful old rose kind of color. It gets about 2.5 by 2.5 at most. Flowers for much of the year, actually, on and off. Really great. But every garden, these can be a little tricky. Trish actually is a pretty tough one, so that's the reason I chose to share it with you. Here's the other penstemon I wanted to share. So penstemon is the largest genus of flowering plants in North America, and we have a few dozen species. This one is from the deserts, and it's the only pink one. It's also the only fragrant one. So you may want to put this in your garden. Penstemon are visited by hummingbirds, bees. Those are their main visitors there. Sages. We have so many gorgeous sages. We're famous for our sages and the scent of them. So this is a picture of 3 sage cultivars or hybrids in their full bloom. And the one at the right, Desperado, is the largest of all of the sage hybrids. The plant can get up to about 6 feet, and with the flowers, it can get up to 10 feet with the inflorescences upright. Quite amazing plants. But oh, the fragrance on these, you've got to put some sages in your garden. This is for orchid. Monterdellas are wonderful garden plants. This is Odoratissima, wonderful name, nice mounding perennial, and it's being visited by, I believe, a pale swallowtail. They attract a lot of butterflies, and they're great for making tea, all the Monterdellas. Spring fruit, these are little apples. That's what Manzanita means on Arctostaphylos glauca, big berry Manzanita. Okay. It's cooperating so well, and now it's moving slowly again. Must be the rain. Come on. So while we're waiting for this to change, Manzanitas are not something that you want to chew on when you go out to the garden. They have a very hard seed inside that can break your tooth, but you can use them in, whoops, I'm not wanting this to happen. You can use them in teas and other preparations. But we'll move forward. California is home to an incredible collection of buckwheats. Everything from the giant buckwheat that I showed you before, here we go, to small, low perennials with sulfur yellow flowers, to white flowers and red flowers. Really quite an amazing palette. Let's see what we can do here. Apologies to all the watchers. Oh, goodness. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I am between 2 mountains, and I think that my connection here is not too great. So that's what's happening. So, oh, shoot. Summer is getting messed up here. There's the Monardella. There's the little apples. Summer's coming, guys. Won't be long. It's only a couple months. Okay, summer is when it gets hot. And, you know, I grew up in San Fernando Valley, and I live in Tahunga. And that's the time when most of the natives are going to go dormant. They're going to stop growing. Their metabolism slows, and they shut down for the summer when there's no rain and it's hot as heck. So this is the time when you want to go sit in the shade, and you're not doing a lot of planting, but as mentioned on that slide that I'm not going to try to go back to, it's okay to plant desert plants, and it's okay to plant riparian plants, because these are things that are used to year-round water. In the desert, we get monsoonal rains in the summer. So you can water your plants to get them established. And of course, riparian means next to creeks or streams. So those plants have access to water in their root zones all of the year. So here's that buckwheat again, and we're going to move on. Come on, little computer. I don't want to talk ahead of the slide. That's a little Acmon blue butterfly. It's maybe about a ½ inch wide, 5/8 of an inch wide. This is a summer star. This is island bush snapdragon. There's also a Baja bush snapdragon, which is actually more heat tolerant than this one. If you put this in your garden, it will flower from late spring through the summer easily. These flowers are visited by hummingbirds. This is a shrub that gets about 5 by 5-ish. There are many cultivars around. And as I mentioned, the Baja one has upright stems, very much like a desert plant, green stems. And again, these great lipstick red flowers that are about an inch long. This is one of our most beautiful desert plants. It's desert willow. It's not a willow. It just has willow-like leaves. And it is a large shrub, small tree that gets up about 15 to 20 feet with these fabulous flowers. And if we had audience participation, I'd ask you to see if you could figure out what it's related to. A lot of people will guess orchid or other flowers like that, azaleas maybe. But in fact, it's related to jacaranda. So if you look at the flower, it will remind you of those wonderful jacaranda flowers from South America. But this is our native desert willow. Summer is filled with yellow composites, yellow daisies. And this is a great garden plant. It's our golden yarrow. It's not the yellow yarrow from Europe, moonshine. It is our golden yarrow and a great garden plant, good for all kinds of perennial beds, good in pots, great for attracting pollinators. And then there is summer fruit. So on the left is Vitus Rogers Red from Barbara Eisenstein's garden. Delicious fruit. They're like little miniature concords. And the plant turns fabulous fall colors. It turns scarlet, Rogers Red. It is an incredibly vigorous vine. Don't think this is a little grape that you're going to keep, clipped on the side of a fence or something. This one will take over a pergola. So just be aware of that. Over on the right are the berries of our blue elderberry, which are loved by birds. And don't eat them when they're green because they'll make you sick. So you want to wait until they're fully ripe and blue or black with the whitish bloom coating on them, and then they can be eaten. You don't want to eat too many. They will give you stomach and intestinal distress, but they're really great for wines or jellies or pies. And don't forget the spent inflorescences. Here are 3 salvias that have finished their bloom, but they have left behind some of the most gorgeous seed heads that nature could possibly create. So don't be too quick to take your old seed heads off because they offer food for birds, but also they offer incredible beauty for the gardener. So at the end of summer, where we all were kind of resting a little bit, but there was so much beauty, fall arrives and the cycle of color begins again. So this is kind of the end, but I have a bonus slide. So I have a list of plants that are repeat bloomers, and I will actually, when I make the handout that I'm going to give to the club to distribute to you guys, I will include that list of repeat bloomers because I couldn't put them all. Many plants will flower more than in one season or for many months at a time. And this is one of them. It's a fairy duster from our local deserts. And it's a sprawling low shrub with these beautiful flowers that are about an inch or a little bit wider in diameter. Just one of our most lovely plants. So that's it. That's the end of the pictures. And now it's time for you to do some work and send some questions over to me and Orchid. Thank you.
So far, we had one question from Brad Hardison. He said, can we plant some native plants like jojoba in the spring through April in the desert, the Coachella Valley, as that is when I get them from plant sales? And
I would say absolutely. And just remember that nothing's drought tolerant the day you plant it. So you're going to have to take your new baby home and give it some regular waterings for the first year or so to get a nice root system attached. But That's one of the perks of being in your area and in the desert is you can plant these plants now.
Okay, we have people not typing questions into the question answer. It would be good. Are there any raised?
There is another question. So, and this is kind
Oh,
of,
there it is. I got it. Okay, here's another one from Julian Krisham. I'm not saying it right. Some of my buckeye trees are covered with what looks like Spanish moss. And I've noticed that the branches with the most tend to die. Is there a correlation? If so, is there a way to discourage or remove the moss?
I wonder if it's moss in your dry climate. And I'm not sure what it is. I don't think it's lichen. That might happen on a very old tree in certain areas. And you would never take lichen off. Lichen is a precious thing and won't hurt your plants. Do you know anything about this orchid?
I'm wondering if it's daughter.
Oh, what color is this stuff? Julianne, can you tell us if it's orange? It's a plant called dodder, D-O-D-D-E-R. And there are a couple species in California, and there's one that's from Japan that's invasive, but usually what we see is the native one. If you can answer back, that would be really great. So dodder is an amazing plant. It used to be in the morning glory family, but they moved it into its own family. What it does is the seed of the dodder germinates at the base of a plant, and then it sends up its growth, and that growth attaches itself to the plant, and then it breaks its connection with the ground, and it lives parasitically on the plant. But it only goes on certain plants in our flora, and it usually does not kill them. So, you know, these things have been coexisting for millions of years, and they haven't killed each other. And we need to remember that. We've only been around for a few thousand in this area. So keep in mind that most things that are happening out in the wild are natural and okay and don't kill the plants. So I hope that helps you, Julianne, and everybody else. So dodder is characteristically a bright orange, orangey yellow, and looks like orange spaghetti hanging on the plants.
Yeah. I'm going to see if she's, I have to scroll down to see if yeah, she says it's white. I do think it's dodder. Except
dodder, dodder is not white.
So, it might be
I think she's
Esmea.
saying she doesn't think it's daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. So not sure about that.
Yeah. It might be Esmea, but I don't know where she's living.
Yeah, exactly.
So it wouldn't be in Southern California.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying a lichen is not real common down here with our humidity or low humidity.
So the next question from Jan Byers. I know a lot of native plants like excellent drainage. My lot is very thoroughly compacted DG-based so-called soil in the subdivision. Which plants do well in compacted soil?
That's a tough one. A lot of plants do okay in not great drainage, but compaction is something else. So I would recommend, if you can, to try and uncompact it before you plant, if it's possible, just to dig until a little bit and cultivate to open it up a bit. A lot of the staples, including something like Toyon, will do really well. I think Galvasia, the bush snapdragons can take heavier soil. There is, I believe, a list in the back of California native plants for the garden of things that grow in heavy soil. Not positive, but I think there is. Orchid, you got any suggestions?
So I would bring in plants in advance to cultivate the soil. So deep-rooted plants like sunflower, even though sunflower can be a little toxic to other plants, planting deep-rooted plants in advance in a kind of a cover crop mix, and even
so deep-rooted, short-lived plants.
Exactly, short-lived, deep-rooted plants, and including also possibly some of the grasses such as Bromus carinatus. So maybe a mix of sunflower, Bromus, annual sunflower. the native annual sunflower, not the one from the catalogs.
Right.
And Bromus carinatus, which is available as the variety Cucamonga, and also possibly you know, one of the annual lotuses or something, or lupins, something like that. A nice cover crop mix. There, Jenny at Theodore Payne has been working on cover crop mixes, and I would plant.
That's a great idea.
Take the long term.
Yeah.
Long term.
What those things will do is their roots will break up the soil for you. And then some of the things that Orchid mentioned also will add a little bit of nitrogen to the soil. And of course, native plants don't need food generally. You don't need to feed them. But that little bit of fixed nitrogen can be really, really good for a depleted site like what you have.
Okay, the next question from Karen Andrews. Should I mulch my natives? And if so, what do I mulch with?
Orchid and I are both greening. This is such a topic of disagreement in some places. I am a fan of mulches. I think they make the garden look much better. They keep soils, especially clay soils, from compacting and cracking and drying up. And they do add, if they are organic mulches, they will slowly decompose and add some nutrients to the plants. I also believe that rock mulches are really gorgeous and are most appropriate around things that don't have forest floor at their feet. So plants from the chaparral, coastal sage scrub, desert plants, they don't have forest floor at their feet. They've got gravel and rocks and scree and sand. So think about using some really beautiful rocks. The advantage to rocks is that they don't break down and they don't need to be replaced or topped up every year, which an organic mulch would need. 2 points of using any mulch is it should be probably at least 2 inches deep to do the trick. And you don't want any of it touching any part of the plant because it will retain moisture and that can get dangerous. Also, really good to know about your mulches, if you're using organic mulches, that is leaves and bark and wood fibers, that they're going to absorb some of the water you put on. So if you're thinking that you need to run your sprinkler for a half an hour, make sure that you know how long it should run so that you're wetting the mulch and getting down into the soil to actually give a good watering to your plants. Orchid, you got anything else to say?
I'm just going to say that I'm also a fan of organic mulch, except of course, you know, with many desert plants, we would rather not use organic mulch, and possibly rocks are also my favorite. But yes, for most land, a lot of people have argued about this, but in my practice, I can often see that just coming in with mulch on a struggling site can make a difference to the plants.
Oh, I'm going to add something back to the compacted soil question. One of the things that you can do to help compacted depleted soils is to put on a layer of organic matter. So that could be compost mixed with mulch or something else, and put a nice layer on that and let that decompose. And it'll revive some of that soil.
Okay, next question from Mana Saldana. How big does Nevin's barberry get?
I was so sorry I had to leave that picture out. I tried to make it short.
Yeah.
So Nevin's barberry can easily get, well, I think you've got a perfect spot. It can get about 8 to 10 feet tall and about 6 to 8 feet wide. So, and it wants as much sun as possible. And I didn't put it in. The berries on Nevin's barberry are some of the yummiest, if you can beat the birds to them. Beautiful red pea-sized berries, and gorgeous, really pokey, stickery foliage. It's a great barrier plant. Birds love to hide in it because they're so safe. And as I mentioned before, all the barberries attract hummingbirds. I don't know if I did mention that, but they do. And bees and all kinds of fun stuff. But if ideally a plant that big, I would put it in a space that's, 8 or 9 feet wide, because plants need some air circulation in between them. So be real honest with yourself about whether that spot is big enough. But it's a fabulous plant, and it is considered extinct in the wild. Theodore Payne introduced it in his 1927 catalog as a wonderful new plant for gardens. And it used to run all through the San Fernando Valley, and it's not there anymore. So this is a plant that is in the trade that doesn't exist in the wild. So it's kind of nice to grow these great plants. These are
Okay,
great
there-
questions.
Yeah, did Orchid have a follow-up there? or-
No, that's
Okay,
fine.
we'll move on. I'd just like to mention that there are a couple of existing plants in our area, in the Badlands, near between Banning and Riverside, which is kind of cool. But some of the populations out in the boonies were actually planted, so it's
That's what I was going to say.
wow.
DNA testing and collections done by Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, now California Botanic Garden, have shown that most of them were planted by Theodore Payne.
Yeah.
And they are populations that are in Placerita Canyon are related to the ones that are out at Rancho, California Botanic Garden out in Claremont. So it's kind of the wonders of our new technology. But,
Yeah. Okay, so next question from Michelle Holmes. Do you have a good resource or guidance on how to maintain prune native? We are trying to strike a balance between our yard looking natural, but not letting some of the larger plants take over.
I'm gonna do this one, Orchid? I'll do it if you don't. So, well, here's my first impression with the question was plant the right plant for your space. Don't put in a plant that's going to get too large for it, because then you're going to have to keep it under control and keep it small. And pruning is not something that is natural to plants, and unless you really know what's happening, you can create a really ugly plant. And it's not sustainable. You're creating green waste. So if you have, like the previous question, somebody has a spot that's 8 feet wide, don't get a plant that gets to be 20 feet wide. And don't plant something that's too tall. So there are so many choices that you don't have to get something that's that big. So just keep that in mind when you make your plant selection. In terms of a good reference, it's hard. The classic book, Care and Maintenance of Southern California Native Plant Gardens, is long out of print. You can spend a week's salary on eBay or Amazon buying a copy of it. You can also find it at your local library and perhaps make copies of certain pages. What do you want to say, Arlie?
Yeah, our chapter still has a box of them that we will put
on
online
kidding?
Plant sale. It's just people don't seem to realize how valuable they are.
My goodness, that is amazing. So those could be for a great silent auction or something and raise some money for the chapter. It's not the best. The organization of the book is a little difficult to follow, but it's the only thing that really lists a lot of different genera and things and tells you what to do specifically and when for certain things. And it is geared for Southern California. So the timing and the plants that are in it are appropriate. I also would recommend Tree of Life Nursery's website. Mike Evans has written incredible stuff on that website, including a lot of things on maintenance and schedules for when to do things. So look at his columns on May in the natural garden or December in the natural garden, and then all of his other writings. And I think you'll find some really, really good information that way.
So I'll just chime in that as far as resources, that the Santa Monica, I think it's the Santa Monica Conservancy, the Santa Monica Land Trust, the Santa Monica Mountains, whatever it is having, has had a series on maintenance recently, and you might look into that and see if you can join those Zoom calls. They are being run by Antonio, and I forgot his last name at the moment.
Sanchez.
Thank you, Sanchez. And he is somebody who actually believes in maintenance as a way to make your native plants look good and your garden look good. And so I would, if it's possible for you to look into them, that would be a resource. But I concur also with the Tree of Life. Unfortunately, this this could be not just a class, but an entire series.
Yeah.
So it's not that we don't want to, if you had asked about a specific plant, we could tell you about that specific plant, but garden maintenance overall, different plants need to be pruned at different times. Some plants, have to have sterilization between every cut. Some plants need to be cut from top to bottom and not the reverse. And so we can't just answer this in a couple of minutes.
I left some really important plants out of this talk, and I meant to mention it while I was in the middle of it. I didn't put any grasses in. There were some pictures of some grasses in there, but don't forget that our native grasses provide not only color, some of them are blue or silver, but even those beautiful grassy tawny ones are great. And they add texture and color and movement to the garden like nothing else does. And what reminded me of this is we have cool season grasses and warm season grasses, and your care for them will vary. So you're going to cut your warm season grasses back at a certain time of the year after they've done their thing to refresh them, and vice versa with the cool seasons. That's why Orchid was talking about. We have a lot of different plants, and then when do you cut back your salvias, and when do you do this, and do you cut back your buckwheats? And it really does get very specific because and I'm a believer in maintenance too. I mean, you need to cut out dead wood, you need to take out diseased wood. Very important. Orchid mentioned if you're cutting manzanitas, you want to dip your clippers, sterilize them in between every single cut to make sure you're not spreading disease. And that's what's good about that book. So if you can find a copy of Care and Maintenance, it's going to give you a pruning schedule. Also, Barbara Eisenstein teaches maintenance classes and has a wonderful handout to go with it. Don't know if they're doing anything over at the Mojave Desert Land Trust. They have a wonderful nursery, and they may be doing some classes again for the public.
Okay, well, we have a lot of questions here, which is nice. Somebody is, let's see, Lenora Mitchell is asking about Encilla farinosa. She says she has some that appear to have white mildew on its leaves. Is that possible?
Is it in the shade? If it's in the shade, it wouldn't be happy. They do have a white coating on their leaves, so don't be fooled by that. If it's powdery mildew, the control is just to wash it off with a strong stream of water. So it probably couldn't hurt to do that, but make sure that you do it on a day that you're also irrigating the roots, so you're not doing a double watering.
Okay. Orchid, have anything to add to that, or? Okay. The next one is Amy Adams. What do you suggest for desert plants that won't be eaten by mice and rabbits? I put a succulent out on my porch. I live near Joshua Tree, and the entire plant was gone, soil and all, the next morning. Our cactus even had huge bites taken out of it.
Good physical controls. You also always want to start with non-chemical things here. So you might want to put some chicken wire around your new plants to protect them from herbivory. And of course, that's not going to deter a rat that's going to crawl over the chicken wire to take a chomp out of your cactus, but that can help with rabbits for sure. Certain plants, like they don't usually like grasses and ferns, but do you have a list of rabbit-proof plants? I think exclusion is probably your best thing to make it so they can't get to it by putting, protecting the young plants.
So I'm reminded of a story that Bruce Pavlik told about doing desert restoration and working with the local Indians. He was privileged to be present at a rabbit drive because rabbit was a major portion of their food, and so he realized how much easier it was to do the restoration post the rabbit drive. So exclusion is really the only, I'm sorry to say, the only answer here. plants may have had a better chance in times when there was more human pressure on the rabbits. I'm not so so yes, so this has been a problem in restoration, and yeah, there isn't, I would hesitate to suggest maybe Asclepias as a toxic plant. Arlie has something to say about that.
Yeah, having done quite a bit of restoration and this big environmental landscaping project that's been overwhelmed with rabbits, they don't like sages.
Interesting.
They'll trim buckwheats. They'll just chop off the branches. I have to cage those. They haven't bothered the Solidago californica, which is interesting. They don't, yeah, so it's so there are some plants that they don't bother, and everything else, if they don't eat it, when new things come into the environment, they tend to chop them, just chop off branches. And so if you cage them for a while until they get to a certain size, then they'll leave them alone. It's very strange. Yeah, I think they like their pathways open sometimes. Anyway, we have more questions here. Tom Vaninsky has a question. He says, what is desired moisture levels for new plantings? I've managed to kill young Manzanitas, Cyanothis, and Cystis. How much, how frequent, for how long?
I want to state that Cystis is not native, just for those people that are wondering. It's a Mediterranean climate plant from the Mediterranean areas in Europe. And if you're near the wild, I would not recommend you putting Cystis in because it has escaped out into the wild in some places. However, back to the question. I am always reticent to give any schedules or any information about how often or for how long. It really depends on your soil and your garden. So you're going to have to experiment. What I can tell you is that when you put on your water to get the plants established, you want to put on enough water to wet the original root ball and around it and below. So a 1 gallon can, if you're planting from a 1 gallon, that root ball is going to be about 7 inches high and about 6 inches wide. So keep that in mind. You want water down below so that the roots are going to chase that water, and then you're going to let the top dry out significantly in between waterings. So the general rule of thumb is once a week. But what if you have heavy clay soil that doesn't dry out? You might be watering before it needs it. And if you have really fast draining soil, it might dry out before 7 days. So my recommendation is to be a good gardener and go out and check your soil. After a while, you'll figure out what is needed. It also depends, the how long question depends on what kind of equipment you're using to water. If you're using drip irrigation, it might be for hours. If you're using a hose end sprinkler, it might be for 30 minutes. So what you want to concentrate is on depth. So when you have done what you think is a really good watering, dig around the plant, not into the original root ball, but around it, and see how deep it went. And if it didn't go at least for a 1 gallon, if it didn't go at least 10 inches deep, then you're not watering long enough. And then you want to let the top dry out about 3 to 4 inches in between waterings, and that's below your mulch. So those are rules of thumb, but you really need to get in touch with your own garden's conditions in order to do this right.
Okay, next question is from Marilyn Waters. She says, I'm in 29 Palms. Are there any plants you can recommend that can take 117-degree heat in the summer once established?
Orchid.
Yeah, so some of our most beautiful plants come from the desert. Some of the most beautiful plants we have in horticulture. So the apricot mallow, Sphaeralcia ambigua, the most beautiful one I ever saw was surrounded on 3 sides by asphalt in Anza Borrego. And this was the most flowering, best looking.
These are members of the mallow family.
Yes.
So the flowers look like little miniature hollyhocks. And both of these plants, the Abutilon palmeri and the Sphaeralcia ambigua, are on my list of rebloomers. These are things that will flower most of the year in your garden, and they can take the heat like crazy. Also, I want to throw in Justicia, which is a big desert shrub that usually has red flowers, sometimes yellow, and it flowers its heart out in the spring and the summer. In the San Fernando Valley, it flowers all year because it doesn't get that hot in the summer. But this plant is so attractive to hummingbirds that its common name is hummingbird. It's tuberosa. It's just a remarkably beautiful, heat-tolerant, free-flowering plant. You don't have to all go succulent. I love succulents, but some people go, oh my God. The desert is full of all sorts of plants, including succulents and other things.
So I do want to also say that one of my favorite plants of all time of any biome is the rose sage, Salvia pachyphylla. Again, a great desert plant. It has fruity smelling foliage that I sometimes like to drop into my spaghetti sauce, and big flowers with big bracts. And it is happiest in the desert. I tried to grow it in Pasadena when I lived there and wasn't that great for that. So a beautiful plant with beautiful fragrance. The condia, the desert lavender, is a beautiful desert plant. Once when I was in Anza-Borrego, I saw the condia with its gray foliage, with the Justicia with its red flowers coming out of it. And that I thought was a stunning thing. And then someone mentioned before there Encilia farinosa, and that's a beautiful, easy plant that that is really kind of also a pioneer plant. So if you're trying to convert your garden from something else to native, that would be a good start. And then penstemon, a couple of penstemons. Eaton's penstemon is a bright red penstemon. Penstemon palmeri, Lili mentioned already. And then penstemon spectabilis and pseudospectabilis are also desert penstemons. And this is just, you know, these are our rock stars of desert plants, but there's plenty more.
Yeah. Jojoba, which came up before.
Right, someone discussed that one.
Okay, we have, oh, and I just want to say Julianne said thank you about the
You're
plant
welcome.
growing. Yeah. Okay, Eric Lesser asks if small area where a small coast live oak was that died and was flush cut, small stump left, that appears to now have Mammalaria mushrooms. Can area be cleaned, remove old root crown, and be able to plant a new valley oak several feet away?
I would get confirmed by somebody whether it is Armillaria or not. And if so, I would not put another oak right in that spot. It's really easy actually to diagnose Armillaria. A lot of things you can't tell, but if you go below ground, if it is Armillaria, then you will find black shoestring growths that are part of the structure, and they'll be down below. Also, if you peel off the bark, it is a very distinctive fungus because it makes a fan-shaped mycelium under the bark, and it smells like mushrooms. So these are two ways for you to yourself try and confirm it. But if you're not sure, you may want to check with your local county extension agent or agricultural commissioner just to find out. Unfortunately, most of the plants that are resistant to oak root fungus, which is Armillaria, they are plants that can take water. So this may not be in your plans to have a plant that needs moderate, but I would get it confirmed, because if it's not Armillaria, then you have a lot of things that you can plant, not to worry.
I just noticed that Julianne mentioned that the plant where she had the gray lichen potentially growing, she's in the Santa Cruz Mountains, so that was probably Usnea.
We thought you were down in San Bernardino County. So if you are up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, it's very likely you have a lichen hanging off of your tree. And those lichens are believed to be a combination of fungi and algae, and they are very, very beneficial. So do not remove. These things evolved with each other, but thanks for clearing that up because you had us stumped.
Yeah.
It's not daughter. And lichens are not parasitic.
Right. And then Jan Byers mentioned she had the compaction, the DG soil part. She says it's a little late to decompact. She's noticed that sages do best so far. I like Salvia clevelandii in that
Great.
environment. So which is great.
You know, this is one way to figure this out. If you have garden tours in your area or through your CNPS chapters or just through, you know, gardening friends, see what they're being successful with. And that's a great way to learn what you might want to try first.
Okay, then we have a question about mistletoe. Adriana Astavino says, any suggestions for getting rid of mistletoe out of oaks?
I'd leave it there. Very rarely do mistletoes kill their hosts. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If the plant is really, really stressed, it might be a problem. But generally, you know, this is the community of flora and fauna that, as I mentioned, evolved without us and does pretty well without us as well.
Might get some phenopepala in our yard.
Yeah, exactly. That's a wonderful bird that eats mistletoe. So,
okay, Jean Weiss asked, what conditions do Monterdellas like? I think I have villosa, Monterdella villosa.
well, generally, I think it depends on where you live. If you're on the coast, no problem with putting them in full sun. And even in the San Fernando Valley, I've seen them in full sun. But if you have a garden that gets up to 117 on a regular basis every year, I would put them in morning sun only, and they will be fine. Monterdellas are actually quite shade tolerant, although I don't recommend you put them in deep shade. So just, I would say, just a little bit of afternoon shade would be recommended. And other than that, they're pretty tough. Coyote Mints.
Very good. You love Monterdellas. Any more to add?
No, but it's wonderful that you that you have Monardella villosa, and it does make great tea, as Lily mentioned, and it does bring a lot of butterflies also.
My very favorite of all of the Coyote Mints is one that's rare and endangered and native to San Diego County, and it's called Monardella viminea. Used to be linoides, and it makes my favorite tea of any California native plant. It's a lemon mint flavor. It is just, Monardellas are great. You should try them.
Okay. Julianne asked, the one from Santa Cruz area, can you recommend native plants for a bog area under redwood?
Wow. We're not used to doing bog plants here,
Right.
but there are, you know, there are choices. Gosh, you know what I would recommend possibly is checking with your local CNPS for recommendations and examples, and also maybe go to Santa Cruz Arboretum. I'm wondering if they have an installation, or Leaning Tree Arboretum in San Luis Obispo also. You're kind of in between there, but they may have some great examples for you.
Yeah, I would go talk to Brett Hall. He's the director of the Arboretum over there
At Santa Cruz. Yeah.
in Santa Cruz, and bring him your problems and tell him we said so.
Yeah.
That's BRETT, new word HALL.
Right.
He's very active in CNPS. Okay, next question. Marilyn Morris says, I have had scale on the lower woody branches of Cyanothis in the garden. The affected branches can die. Any ideas on preventing or treating?
One of my mentors would have said, hoik it. Scale is incredibly difficult to control. And usually it's an opportunistic insect. They usually get on plants that are weakened. And it's just really hard to get rid of. They're also spread by Argentine ants. So it can be a big problem. I I don't want to tell you, that this is going to be something you can control. You could try some horticultural oil, which is non-toxic and basically smothers the scale, but you need to treat the scale when the crawlers are out. The adults have those little protective coverings, and the crawlers are little tiny cigar-shaped beige things, and they're unprotective. Those are the babies. And if you can spray maybe every 7 to 10 days with a horticultural oil, you might be able to get several generations and get some control with the crawlers. But scale is really, really hard to control. So look at your Cyanothis and see what might be stressing it. Is mulch mounded up around the base? Is it getting the water it needs? Is it getting too much sun or not enough or whatever? Something that might be an imbalance in the growing conditions that would predispose it to attacks. And then change what you're doing. And if it gets really bad, take it out and get a new one.
And I wanna reiterate the control of the ants. So ants are farming the scale, and so you have to treat both the scale and the ants, either with diatomaceous earth, which has to be renewed pretty often to work, or with other controls. There are some less toxic ant controls that you can find in gardening stores that rely more on boric acid, but also if you overwater, that also brings ants. So check your watering schedule.
Okay, Karen Andrews asks if we can repeat the name of the book for pruning.
I will put it in the chat.
Okay,
Yeah, it is not a pruning book per se. It's all about maintenance. The name of the book is Care and Maintenance of Southern California Native Plant Gardens. The pruning book, oh gosh, I wish I could remember the title of it. There's a very good pruning book out of, oh shoot, the small press in Arizona. Help me, Orchid. Can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay. Mana Saldana asks, what is a manzanita that will grow tall and narrow for narrow spaces?
Refugio is actually fairly columnar, but I don't know how narrow you need this to be. I don't know of any manzanita that's going to get tall without being, 6 feet wide or so. So it depends on your spaces. My rule of thumb, by the way, is if you look at a label and it says it's going to get 6 feet wide and 8 feet tall, add a foot or more in every direction. Because things get big here in Southern California. We have a very long growing season, and if they're happy, they're really happy. And you really, as I mentioned before, want to give your plants enough space so there's good room for them to grow. I believe that the natural shape is the prettiest a plant can be. So you don't want to be hacking back on it because it got too big. And you want to have room to see that wonderful manzanita that you've put in.
So I will pitch, I want to echo everything that Lili said, but I want to pitch Manzanita Sentinel is one of the more upright of the species, but it is true that all the Manzanitas were, people didn't realize how long they would grow and therefore how big they would get. And so what you see in books may not, in fact, be correct.
Sentinel is an excellent cultivar for Southern California, and it can be pruned really beautifully. There's a gorgeous picture in California Native Plants for the Garden of one that's been, the lower limbs have been taken off, so you have this incredible structure. It also has pink flowers. Very pretty.
We have such wonderful questions here. Okay, so
Yeah.
Linda Richards asks, she says, some seek low maintenance. Can you give examples like Manzanita for little to no maintenance?
There are so many.
Yeah.
A lot of maintenance depends on what you want to do with the plant. If you want a toy on to just grow naturally, you're going to get a multi-trunked, large shrub, small tree. But if you want to make it into something that is smaller, you can use it as a hedge if you wanted to. That's going to be more maintenance. You can put it in a pot. So it depends on whether you want something to just grow naturally. And that will lower your maintenance if you're going to let your plants do that. I remember talking to Barbara Eisenstein once when people were really, really getting into natives and they were wanting no maintenance gardens. And Barbara said, no maintenance, what fun is that? Okay, so, you know, gardening is a participatory experience. We all want to put in gardens that need little maintenance, and the best plants for that are the natives that evolved in your area. That's going to give you the least maintenance possible. But you always have to go out there. You have to weed. You have to take out dead and crossing wood on your plants. You need to watch for insect and other pest infestations. So you always want to go out there. You know, a really good gardener, as my dad said, green thumbs are not genetic. It just means you go outside and you look at the plants every day. And if you see something that's not right, you think about whether you should do something. You know, that's a green thumb. So, you know, get in touch with your garden so that you can go out and figure out what it needs. And in terms of low maintenance, yes, Manzanitas are one if you pick the right one for your spot. Also Toyon, our hollyleaf cherry. There are so many. Lemonade berry, sugar bush. I mean, these are fabulous shrubs that if you had the space for them, they need nothing. They really need nothing. You know, a lot of the plants, the most maintenance they'll need, like the grasses, is to be whacked back once a year. You know, or the Zauschneria that I started the program with, the California Fuchsia. All it needs is a hacking back once a year. That's the only thing you have to do with it, besides get it off to a good start. So there's so many plants that would fit into your low maintenance category.
We do have a follow-up question from Jan Byers regarding the California Fuchsia. It seems like a good segue from what you just said. She says, regarding cutting back California Fuchsia in January, mine may still have some flowers on them then, so I've never cut them back. You know, nice hummingbird food at that time. Does cutting back encourage them to bloom more the next fall? And she also mentions this is one plant that seems to do okay in her compacted soil.
Good. Again, this is for the previous question. Try some California Fuchsias. My answer to that is if you want the plant to be compact in your garden, you want a nice compact mound, you need to cut it back every year. If you don't care, it will flower on the ends of branches always, but you're going to end up with it stooling out in the middle and no foliage and kind of an empty space in the center. So you know, in nature, of course, nobody cuts it back, but they ramble. What we want is a nice mounding perennial. So I would say go ahead and cut it back, or cut part of it back. It's one of the tricks with hummingbirds is to cut part of the plant back now and leave some of the flowers for them. And then when you see the buds come in, which will happen very, very quickly in late summer, cut the rest of it back and let it start over again. It's a pretty malleable plant. So, but the hummingbirds will find something else, I'm sure, if you do cut it back completely.
That's great. This is very helpful for me too. Then we have Mana Saldana asks, she says she lives in, or I don't know if it's a she or a he with the name. I live in Redlands. Can desert plants be planted with chaparral plants?
You take this one, Orchid.
Yes.
So, you know, the most important thing is that you pick plants that are amenable to the conditions you have in your garden. And you want to put things together that have the same requirements for soil and light and water. And if those happen to be desert and chaparral together, you're cooking with gas.
So, I also want to pitch, I know that we haven't had a field trip for a year, but we hope to have field trips possibly in this summer. And if you wonder what grows near you, going on a field trip can be one of the best ways to really find out. And honestly, if you're looking for a low care garden, planting what grows near you is the least care.
Okay, we have a couple of questions left, and I guess we're kind of going over time. Is that okay?
Yes.
So Kathy Chang asks, she says, I'm in Alhambra, so in San Gabriel Valley, and not too far from Pasadena. I tried hummingbird sage twice and planted under the pomegranate tree. They both died. I would like to know if I plant in morning sun area, would that help? I know this plant can't take full sun.
Well, it can take full sun out in the wild, actually. But in the summer, I'm going to show my hands, it just kind of does this and hunkers down for the summer. In our gardens, we want it to stay green and look nice. So we tend to water it all year, and it doesn't go dormant and look like that. So they do grow in full sun. And if you're along the coast, I would definitely put it in full sun. In Alhambra, I would give it afternoon shade, but not too much shade. Hummingbird sage is often, people are always looking for shade plants and they go, oh, shade, and they put it in deep shade. And what you end up with is a nice crop of powdery mildew and very few flowers. So make sure it gets direct sun at least until 11 or 12 in the morning. Gosh, it's such a tough plant. I'm wondering why both of yours died. Make sure that you water it regularly, the new plant, probably in your area in regular, average soil, probably about once a week, and a good deep watering, and then let the surface dry out. One of the mistakes that a lot of gardeners make is they water when the soil is still wet. So make sure in Alhambra, you probably have some clay soil in there, I would bet. So make sure that you test your soil before you water, and then give a good soak. So I encourage you to try again. For those that don't know it, hummingbird sage is the only sage in the California flora that has flowers in the red group. They're actually magenta, and it grows as a ground cover with individual rosettes that spread out on rhizomes, as opposed to being a rounded big shrub like the other sages. It's really a very, very special plant. And it makes great tea.
Okay, I was just checking the chat in case there were more. We have another question from Karen Gulbrun. We have a 2-year-old park strip garden in North Hollywood, sandy soil. We have Palo Verde, coyote bush, sage, mountain mahogany, and others. It has thrived and bloomed vigorously with drip irrigation, but should I phase out the drip? I've got a lot of contradicting opinions.
Orchid.
I'm going to say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If things are working for you, I would keep doing exactly what you're doing. Remember that in a parkway strip, you're dealing with a lot of reflected light and heat that you wouldn't have elsewhere. And so naturalizing your plants may be harder there. And so I would continue doing what you're doing as long as it's working.
Also, we all would love to have a garden that never needs water. And I know Steve Hartman has a garden in Sherman Oaks that he never waters in front, but some years it doesn't look too good. And a lot of it is wildflowers, or at least I haven't been over there in a few years, but so some years he doesn't have wildflowers, but it's what he's done. So it really is your choice. But I would think in North Hollywood, and this sounds like a beautiful parking strip, congratulations. I would say if you completely stop watering, you can get into trouble. These plants do need some irrigation. They only need it once a month, a really good deep soak. And if you're using drip, make sure it's on for hours. Don't do just a little bit. But I agree with Orchid, but do check your drip system and make sure that the emitters are not getting clogged up and that it's still working. That's an important part of using drip, is to check it and maintain it.
Okay, do we have time for a couple of more questions? I found some in the chat.
Yes.
Sure.
Is that okay? Okay, says, good morning. I have an established hedge of Matillaha poppies. Many friends and neighbors would like a transplant. Often people have trouble with keeping them alive. Can you recommend a planting mix and any tips for transplanting?
So I didn't put Matillaha poppy in the show, in my thing. It is the thing everybody wants to grow. It's the largest flower in the California flora. It's also known as the fried eggplant because the 5-inch wide flowers look like sunny side up. But it is an incredibly aggressive, invasive plant if it's happy. It will come up Actually, Kitty Connolly, former executive director of Theodore Payne Foundation, had it come up in her basement in Pasadena. And I saw something on the Royal Horticultural Society years ago where it came up in somebody's house. So it will come up in your neighbor's garden. It will come up in the middle of your toy-on where you don't want it. So you really need to consider whether this is a plant that is appropriate for your garden. I do not recommend it for small urban gardens. It needs to be on a hot, dry, sandy hillside where it can go nuts and be beautiful. So that's my opinion. And you can do whatever you want and buy it because you love it, but you're not going to be so happy in 5 or 6 years. In terms of cutting back and sharing, you do want to get pieces of the rhizome that you divide in the fall. And that's the important thing, is to try and do this in the autumn. Don't do it any other time of year because the plant's going to want to go dormant. And you can get good sections. And Orchid had some feedback as well.
Yeah, so part of the feedback is really get a substantial portion of the root. When people propagate this plant, they dig, I have seen even 3-foot trenches, and I'm not saying that you need to put a 3-foot trench in your yard, but getting 6 inches of root isn't going to get you there at all. You need at least a foot and maybe 18 inches of root. And then I have successfully, I handed this all off to David King at the Learning Garden when I had extra Matilla hot poppy for my job, but he used LGM cactus mix, which is one of my favorite soil types. LGM is a small private company, but you can find their cactus mix in some of the garden centers that aren't the chain centers.
It's good stuff.
There's another question. I have native buckwheats on one part of my property. Can I collect seeds to plant them in another part of my property? And how is the best way to do that?
Not my forte. I know cactus and succulent seeds. I would think that you could, this is a place where you might want to call Jenny Arnold over at Theodore Payne. She'll give you the ins and outs of when is the best time to harvest and how to make sure that they don't explodiate and go somewhere else, and what time would be at what time, and good techniques for starting them.
Did Orchid have anything?
I don't really have anything to add to that. Theodore Payne and also California Botanic Garden do have propagation workshops from time to time. If I were doing this, and remember, propagation is not what I do, I would collect the seeds when they turn fully rust, and maybe even put a little paper bag around the seeds I wanted to collect so that, as Lily said, they don't explodiate. That's my new favorite word. and then I would plant them in the fall, and then Arlie might have something to say about that as well.
Yeah, I have a lot of experience with seed collecting and processing and propagation, and with Eriogonum fasciculatum. And she's correct about, when they're nice and rusty, when they're almost ready to disarticulate. We like to see when the plant is ready to give them to you, and they're ripe. You can just collect handfuls of the rusty, dry material, and put it in a paper bag. I like to screen them down for propagation so that I get rid of some of the dried, tepals, the petals and sepal material, so I can actually see what I'm doing. Because a lot of time there are a lot of empty seeds in Eriogonum. But you can just, plant them with just a little, in flats with just a little bit of soil over the top in the fall, and keep them moist, and they'll come up. I get lots of seedlings under my Eriogonums, and I just move them around if I want them somewhere else.
Nice.
I think that's all of the questions. I've checked the chat. Let me see if there's any. I think let's see. Just double checking.
Somebody asked,
Oh, there's some new ones in the question answer.
okay,
Per Orchid's advice, yes, part of my yard is now colonized. By things that have seeded in my from my not so distant wildlands. And Celia farinosa shows up, though they never live very long. I have an expanding patch of lupinus bicolor. A little Phacelia, probably Phacelia distans, shows up everywhere around in the spring. So when you live next to wildlands, you get all kinds of, I get lots of stuff in my yard too. And then you have a recommendation for full shade area in Pasadena and clay soil. So shady clay soil area.
so one of my favorites for shady areas might be Ribes viburnifolium. Catalina currant is a great, easy spreading plant for shade. And the stems do have a fragrance that's almost like lemon pledge if you touch them. And also it does flower and fruit. The flowers are small, so they're not big showy flowers, but they do bring hummingbirds and birds for the fruit.
Okay. So, and so Mary Ward was just thanking you about your response for Motilla poppy, and she just mentions that in Riverside they seem to be quite well behaved. They even hedge, and they seem to move across the garden very slowly. I'm also in Riverside. I'm on an acre and a quarter, and I planted my Motilla poppy way away from the house. For establishing it, gophers loved it. And so I finally planted them in little wire baskets, and then they took off. So they were able to establish without getting chomped on, to get going. And now they're all over a side of my hill, which is nice. But they did spread quite a bit, but I've been here since 1992, and I think I planted them around 1995. So it definitely spread.
That must be beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice in a good.
One of the key things is to plant in the fall, just for those that are interested. It really does want to go dormant when it goes dormant when it's warm, and you will not have any success establishing it in May. So figure you want to get your plants in November and put them in and supplement the rains. And that's something, by the way, for people to remember. If we don't get a really good rainstorm, that is, at least a half an inch or so, you need to water your garden. One of those storms that is happening in San Francisco, and we get the tail end and get 1/10 of an inch, that is not watering your garden. You want to make like a good rain year is what you want to do. So every couple of weeks, you want to give your garden a really good soak if we don't get one naturally. And that's during the cool season, when naturally they would get good rain.
Oh, I think you guys, we've answered all the questions. I just want to thank both Lili and Orchid for taking the time and being such experts in answering all these amazing questions. I would just like to mention that, yes, I'm the field trip chair for our chapter, and I do expect to resume some field trips in the summer. I'm fully vaccinated now. We will hope that we will keep our groups small, and we will have some COVID guidelines for the field trips. But we will resume, and I'll be scoping out places that might be good for summer.
Great.
If anybody has any ideas, you can contact me. That would be great. Thank you.
And
that's wonderful.
I do want to remind everyone also that we have fixed on a date for our fall plant sale. So if this is exciting you and you want locally appropriate plants for the Riverside San Bernardino area. Arlie is going to tell us about that.
Yes, so I have reserved a time slot for another online plant sale because there's still some uncertainty about having, an in-person plant sale for the fall. So we're going to have another online plant sale. The first 1 to 2 days will be for members only, and then we'll open it up to the general public. And this will be for about 4 days in the first week of October. So I don't have the exact dates yet, but just keep that in mind, put it on your calendar that you'll want to be able to attend our online sale the first week of October. I will make sure that we have some care and maintenance books available. You can also buy some books when we do our online plant sale. We have a number of books that are great. And then the curbside pickup will follow. It looks like it's going to be the weekend of October 15th through 17th. Well, the pickup would be on the Saturday and Sunday. I think that's the 16th and 17th of October. So that's the latest. Hopefully it won't have to change, but mark your calendars for that timing.
And thanks everybody who showed up with questions. We really appreciate it, and are glad to have a chance to talk about our favorite thing, native plants. And thank you so much to Arlie for running our questions, and thank you to Lili for her amazing expertise. And we will see everyone in a month.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.